is Charity Majors, and I'm going to be talking to you about why on-call doesn't have to suck. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Charity. I am the co-founder and CTO of honeycomb.io. My blog is charity.wtf. And Liz Fong-Jones and I just recently released Observability Engineering. So if you want to pick up a copy, go for it. How many of you have ever said or thought something kind of like this? Or this? Or maybe this? Or if you're more of a manager type these days, maybe it goes something more like that. or we even to get some one-upping. Anyway, there are a lot of toxic patterns around being on call. And there are a lot of people who have had really terrible experiences, even traumatic experiences, including myself. I have actually been on call since I was 17 years old. So I've seen it. I've been it. I've done it. And I am not attempting to deny or minimize that pain and suffering that people have gone through. Of course you would hate it if you've had a terrible experience. You're probably justified. My goal is not to convince you that you shouldn't feel that way. My goal is to tell you that it doesn't have to be that way. It's not inevitable, and we can do better. I want to convince you that, on-call done correctly can be a mark of pride, self-respect. It can be an honor in some organizations. Like you've achieved enough, you know enough that you are trusted with the keys of the kingdom. I believe that you can run on-call rotations that are 100% volunteer only, and that people will volunteer for them. And I think that on-call week can be something that most engineers legitimately enjoy and look forward to. And I also don't believe that this is a bar that's so high that only Google and Facebook can do it. It's not hard. It just takes leadership and diligence and patience. The biggest obstacle that I encounter is with teams not believing that they deserve nice things. They just lack confidence in themselves. They don't think they're good enough or special enough, or that they can't achieve this. But if your engineering team is capable of writing a decent test suite, you are equally capable of doing everything I'm going to talk about. Might not be easy or fast, but it can be done, and it is so worth it. The way I think about on-call is maybe a little bit different for the way a lot of people think about it. I don't think of on-call as the shit work. I don't think of it as stuff that the powerful people opt out of as soon as they possibly can. I think about on-call duty like a social contract between engineers and managers who each have their role to play in serving our users. I think about it as, a really critical loop, an essential part of, the feedback loop of software ownership, of owning what you build, which is really rewarding and satisfying if you've done it well. And finally, I think of it as, sort of a proxy metric for how well your team is performing, how happy your users are, how healthy your system is. And actually, finally, it's also on-call and the practices around it are a set of real expertise and tribal knowledge, collected best practices and techniques that you can learn by reading the internet or my slides. To follow up on that just a little bit, on-call is a social contract between engineers and managers. I think that every engineer should be on call for their code. I'm not a fanatic here. There are situations, every situation is unique. There are circumstances, there are midway points, this is just ultimately, ideally, I think that the feedback loop of you write it, you look at it, you debug it. It's so powerful. It's so tight. It's the best way to write and own code. Hands down. It's not harder than the way you're doing it now. It's actually easier than the way you're doing it now. Engineers, our job is to own our code in production. But managers, their role, if a manager is asking the engineers to be on call for the company, you have a sworn duty to make sure that it does not suck. It's your job. Like, I feel strongly about engineers, our responsibility to own our own code. But if your manager isn't giving you the tools that you need to make it not terrible, you should leave. You should not work for them because they don't deserve it. If they aren't doing their part, don't do yours. And what that comes down to is a lot of, making sure that you can get reliability work on the product roadmap instead of just trying to like tuck it in the corners and like find spare days to work on it. It means, holding forth for policies that, that relieve people's stress, that make it easier. Basically, nobody has a right to make other people miserable. And this is what it comes down to. Who should be on call for the code? Engineers, anyone who has code in production. I sometimes get the reaction from software engineers who are like, is this payback? And like, I'm not going to deny that ops engineers have a certain reputation for masochism. Absolutely. I got a lot of joy in my 20s out of, working the hardest and the longest and waking up the most, and it was exciting and thrilling. Now I'm not in my 20s anymore, and I feel differently. But no, it's not payback, and it's not about, bringing software engineers into the misery with us. It's about, this is actually the only way to truly make things like better, like transformatively better. Having people try to own code who haven't written the code, who are treating it like a black box, the systems just degrade. They get worse and worse and worse, and there's no virtuous feedback loop like there is where you build it, you run it, you own it. And on-call is really how we close this feedback loop. It's the missing link. Software ownership is, you need the outputs of your system in order to understand how it's doing. On-call is a socio-technical problem, and it can only be solved by socio-technical solutions. You can't solve it just with people solutions, like adding more people to the on-call rotation. You can't just solve it by, paying people more. You can't just solve it with technical solutions like, moving to SLOs. You only solve it with, a combination of these tools and dealing with your own situations for the unique ones that they are. So, like I said, if owning your code sucks, managers need to, these are the basic steps that I would tell any manager to take in order to feel out where in the system the problem is. I don't know your circumstances. I don't know what's wrong. I don't know why your on-call duty is miserable, but it's usually, in my experience, it's usually either that you're not following best practices when it comes to alerting, or, the team isn't quite performing. I'll talk a little bit more about it doesn't mean that people are bad engineers. It just means that the socio-technical system isn't really working. I think it's really important as a manager to constantly graph and track all of the alerts outside of business hours. If you don't add yourself to the rotation, which I really encourage people to do, you have to have a feel for the pain that your team is going under when it changes, when it ebbs and it flows. You need to make sure, you need to go to bat with product and the other parts of the org to make sure that engineers have the time to fix stuff. And, you need to keep your finger on the pulse. You need to be curious, and you need to never assume that it's a solved problem, done with, because this is just something that requires constant maintenance. Other objections that I sometimes hear, my time is too valuable, or I don't know how to navigate production. Well, we should teach you. Or I have a new baby. That one is super valid. Nobody should be condemned to being woken up by two squalling things in the middle of the night. Nobody who has a baby that's waking up in the middle of the night should ever have to be on call, period. We have a follow the sun routine. Lucky you, that's awesome. I hope you're still going to look into how to support your code during the daylight hours so that you're still getting that virtuous feedback loop. I need my sleep / it's stressful. This is something that bugs me a little, because every time software engineers start talking about how hard it is to be on call, it's like, who do you think is doing it for you? do you think that these pages just aren't getting answered? Like, no, some poor schmuck who gets paid less than you and has less power is just your buffer. It's this real like sort of engineering classism that I really dislike. If it's not worth your time, it's not worth anyone's time. And the person who is best equipped to debug and make the situation better is you. Common reasons for on-call sucking. This is kind of the flip side of the manager list that I had. You can read it. I'm going to speed up a little because I know I only have 20 minutes. So let's go. Let's make on-call fun again. And the three sort of umbrella categories of stuff I'm going to cover here are, what are the best practices? What should you adopt, when it comes to alerting and monitoring? Most people's systems have so many failures going on all the time that they just don't know about. There are so many gremlins, there are so many unknown unknowns. So often they get paged or alerted about something and they never actually figure out what it was. It goes off and then it recovers and people are just like, well, and they never know. There are gremlins hiding in your system. And in order to have a sane on-call shift and in order to really be a high-functioning team, you need to start to get rid of some of them. You need to shake out, you need to get the population down to something controllable. And you need to look at the socio-technical process around your team and look for ways to function at a slightly higher level so that the effort that you put in, has more leverage and more outcomes. We'll talk more about that in a sec. When it comes to adopting alerting best practices, I've got a list here. I'm going to put the slides up for sure, but so I'm not going to go into all of these, but I do want to touch on just a couple of them. SLOs. It is the only way to scale your alerting system past a certain point is to over from, alerting on symptoms and side effects and causes and this disk failed and this CPU is hot. You got to stop that and you got to move to SLOs. Service level objectives will give you a budget of errors, right? And you can set up an alert to let you know if you're running out of your budget too fast. Otherwise, you can sleep through the night. If it'll wait until the morning, you can sleep through the night. You only need to get paged and woken up if you're going to burn through your SLO in the next, couple of hours. They're a life changer. This also forces you to get better at auto remediation of things that just fail all the time, right? It's also super critical to have 2 lanes of alerts. One for, wake me up in the middle of the night, but that should be a scrutinized, small, and well-curated list of only things that correlate with user pain, right? Give up on the idea that you can page yourself before the users are impacted. You can't. You can't. Don't try. Correlate your pain with your user's pain. But you want to have a second lane for all of the alerts that don't quite rise to the level of wake me up in the middle of the night. When you're on call, you should probably go through that list, like maybe in the morning and in the evening, just like clear them out. And this is where you can take care of things like, full disks and whatever. You can't survive if you're paging yourself about everything. When it comes to out-of-hours alerts, like I said, set a very high bar for what you are going to wake people up for, only if your users are being seriously impacted. But take those out-of-hour alerts as seriously as a heart attack. These are not diabetes. These are a heart attack. Track them, graph them, fix them, get them onto your product roadmap. Don't let them wake you up over and over. Don't let them go off over and over. If something alerted out of hours, hold a retro, look to auto-remediate it, fail partially and gradually, to use your error budget, if at all, instead of failing catastrophically. Okay, those are the main ones I wanted to call out for section 1. For section 2, reducing the gremlins in your system. A big part of this is introducing observability. And I don't just mean metrics and aggregates because that won't do the job. It has to be observability that is based on arbitrarily wide structured data blobs. I've talked about this a lot. I'm not going to recap it here, but that's what gives you the ability to inspect down to the level of each individual rows what is different between this build ID and that build ID, what is actually failing and why, what do they have in common. Right? You also need to start practicing observability-driven development, meaning you instrument your code as you're developing it, you merge domain, and then you go look at it. You look at it in production, and you ask yourself, is it doing what I expected? Does anything else look weird? Right? You will catch like upwards of 80% of all bugs right then and there, which is baller because the cost of finding and fixing bugs goes up exponentially from the moment that you write them. The more you can shift left, the more that you can find these and fix these early. Like this is a big part of what will free you up to have a healthy on-call shift is just getting out of the stage where you're just reacting to things going off. You have some peace and quiet, you can go and start proactively investigating and looking for the outliers, looking for the things that might break. That's the key to winning here. Investments you should make, you should absolutely use feature flags to decouple your deploys from your releases. You want to be able to continuously deploy without separately from releases, which need to be planned and scheduled and with marketing and press releases and everything, right? Two different things. Also, you don't want to be in the position of like, okay, it takes us 3 hours to deploy. The press release goes live at 10 a.m. So I need to start deploying at 7 a.m. Oh shit, it breaks at 8:30 a.m. and I have to start over. Raise your hand if you've done that. You're going to need to spend about 20% of your time, like steady state, on tech debt and investments, and that's fine. And if you don't do that, it's all going to build up and it will be much worse for you. Remember that it's much easier to keep from falling into an operational hole than it is to dig your way out of one. So that ongoing, maintenance is key. Road mapping, reliability work and tech debt is not secondary to product features. Build for reliability, get the work on your roadmap, and then run chaos experiments. If you think you fixed something, you haven't fixed it until you've seen it try to fail, right? Something that we do is, we run a lot of Kafka and a lot of database drives, and we used to have nodes like fail fairly often because we had a bunch of them. And we had an automatic bootstrap script that, worked-ish, but like we would often get paged in the middle of the night because something went down. So we started hardening that script, the boot script, and now we kill off the oldest Kafka node every Tuesday at 3 p.m. We kill off the oldest retriever node every Wednesday at 3 p.m. This lets us watch them fail during the day instead of seeing them fail at 3 in the morning. And it also gives us it stresses that, right? So that we're not only stressing the script in times of emergency, we're just constantly exercising it. And lastly, improve your performance as a team. And the main thing that I want to talk about here is, deploys, but also how well does your team perform? And this question, it's a loaded question, right? A lot of people get a little bristly when you ask it. But I want to make sure you understand that this is not the same as asking how good are you at engineering. High-performing teams get to spend most of their time doing new and interesting things that move the business forward. Lower-performing teams spend way too much of their time doing everything else. And if you want to know how high-performing your own team is, always start with the DORA metrics, right? How long does it take you to get your code out? How often does it fail? How many, how long does it take you to recover from an outage? And how frequently do you deploy? And I would add a fifth, which is how often do you get alerted outside of business hours? Because remember, this is the thing that correlates most tightly with people getting burned out. It really pays off to be on a high-performing team. Being on one of the top 10%, top 25% of teams is 973 times more deploys than the average team. It really pays, which is why it's worth tracking these metrics, right? Paying attention to them and actively working to shrink your deploy time, actively working to, to auto deploy, actively working to like bring those DORA metrics into a high performing place, because great teams are what make great engineers. Your ability to ship code relies a lot less than you think on your own personal library of algorithms and data structures, and a lot more on the socio-technical system that you participate in. There's actually a term for this in sociology. They call it the FAE, the fundamental attribution error. We all think that it's like 80% me and 20% the system, and it's really the exact opposite. So technical leadership really consists of paying attention to those feedback loops in the middle of this complex socio-technical system. It's not complicated, it's complex. The outputs feedback into the system. But that's why you can get such amazing results just from tuning it. You can get, a step function in productivity for your entire team by decreasing your build and deploy time from 2 hours to, 30 minutes. Great teams make great engineers. I just wanted to underline that a little. But now that we're done, right? And say we've done all this, the whole list, you've done it all. Now that we have switched from to SLOs, and we've shaken all of these unknown unknowns out of our system. No more gremlins. Now that we have the instrumentation, so we can trust the fact that when something goes wrong, we can always find the answer why within seconds, maybe minutes. We trust ourselves to do this. We trust that it's going to be fast. We trust that we can understand. And now that we are auto deploying our changes to production within minutes, and now out of our alerts are exceedingly rare, you might be saying, I'm still not happy. You told me I was going to be happy to be on call. I may not be as angry about it, but I'm not happy about it. So I saved the best for last. This is a policy that I think is absolutely everyone should do, which is, if you're on call, you are not supposed to work on product or the roadmap. You're not factored into the estimate. You are discouraged from working on stuff, and you're encouraged to work on the system itself, to spend that 20% time just like, what's been bugging you, what's been annoying you, what rubs you the wrong way, what is always just like kind of it's been there and you've disliked it for a long time, but it's never really risen to the level of being important enough to fix it. That's what on-call week is for, right? Ideally, you're getting woken up. I think everyone who runs a 24/7 highly available service should be willing to be woken up 2 or 3 times a year, right? If you can't handle that, go work on some other software that doesn't have the requirement, because there's lots of software out there that doesn't have 24/7 reliability needs, right? You can do that, or you can agree to support your code and be woken up a couple times a year, right? And you should only be alerted, a few times a day, and most of them should be like no ops, right? Really, on call should consist of doing, a sweep through your second lane in the morning, sweep through the second lane in the evening, and, taking your laptop and your phone with you to tether if you happen to go to the movies or something. But you shouldn't have to plan your life around it, right? So your time should be spent doing fun stuff that you don't usually get to do, stuff that, helps the entire team, stuff that's, improving everybody's quality of life. Also, I think a really great policy is to say, if you're on call for this week, you get the next Friday off. You can't save these days up or anything, but you get a 3-day weekend, just as a matter of course. I think you deserve it. The question of comp often comes up, and I'm of mixed minds about this. I'm not anti it, but I'm not going to get into my many thoughts about this. I will just say that there is one big exception, and that is, if you are finding it difficult to get your engineers' reliability work on the roadmap, if you're not being given the resources to make on-call not suck, or if it just temporarily is terrible, pay them. Pay them a lot. Pay them so much that it hurts. Pay them so much that finance and the exec team are like, please work on reliability stuff, please, right? If they've shown that they don't care about your people's time and mental health and sleep, then convert that into something they do care about, money. And this is the end. Are we too busy to improve? Yes? No? Hopefully not.